The inspiration for Under the Nile was, it's a little bit hard to determine. I think at some point I had become fascinated with drugs, as far as a way of potentially changing a person, not just helping out with pain, but like steering a person's personality in a what would be seen to be a more positive light. Of course, there were antidepressants. I had been to a therapist for a little bit, and I had been prescribed antidepressants, but I never really got much out of them. But I thought to myself, there's all kinds of technology out there. There's all kinds of stuff that people are, pharmaceutical type people are working on. And by the way, this was really before I became a conspiracy kind of person, if you want to call it that. I really wasn't, I was looking at certain things here and there, but I still generally believed the official story of things like, like 9/11 at that time, and the Kennedy assassination, and so forth. I really wasn't. I as far as looking into the nefarious deeds of high-ranking people in government and in culture and in the military-industrial complex, corporations and NGOs and Hollywood, that interest didn't really get sparked in me until a couple of years later. But I guess I was interested enough in the potential nefariousness I was cynical enough about government to think they could, experiment on citizens in a way that was not really ethical. This is really before I had even looked into MK Ultra and what the government. What's been admitted about the MK Ultra experiments, much less the stuff that they haven't admitted to, that's surely still going on. So maybe it's somewhere in my mind that was in the background, but the premise of Under the Nihil, which is spelled Nihil, and I guess typically that would be nihil, but I wanted it to be pronounced nihil because it was like Nile means has it brings up the specter of nihilism. And so, if you really believed in nothing, if you really truly believed in nothing, you would be able to do anything, because why not? There'd be a lot of freedom there. On the other hand, you would probably be miserable, because you would you would think to yourself, there's no purpose for anything. And I think that man needs purpose in life. I think it's built into us. But I thought to myself, in light of what's going on, in light of, say, the Iraq War, which by then, 2011, it was kind of old news, but there was still the war on terror, and 9/11 hadn't happened that long ago. And I remember thinking to myself, well, what if there's some, what if they try to duplicate the Muslim, say, suicide bomber? I remember reading something that was put forth, maybe it was by ostensibly by Osama bin Laden, or maybe it was by somebody else speaking on behalf of Al-Qaeda or some, Muslim radical group, saying, we believe in death. You in the West believe in life, but we believe in death. And so, the whole idea, like the suicide bomber, had long intrigued me. Somebody who had that kind of that kind of really faith, and that kind of willingness to end his own life in the service of this of the cause, maybe of in the case of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for the cause of freeing Palestine, but also surely was surely must have had some metaphysical, religious, spiritual motivation. Otherwise, why would he want to die? And of course, there was, we heard things about how, if you're a suicide bomber and you die, you get 89 beautiful virgins in heaven. And I don't know, that maybe there was some truth to that, maybe there wasn't, those kinds of stories. But still, even if you just thought to yourself, they just wanted to die so they could get laid, and take the most cynical kind of stance on it as possible, still, that's not something that people in the West, even soldiers in the West, it's not something that, it's not a kind of, if you're a Western soldier, if you're fighting in the Iraq War and you're a Western soldier, you want to survive your tour of duty and then get the hell out of there. But if you're a suicide bomber, if you're somebody who's with one of these organizations, you want to kill as many of the enemy as possible. When you pull the pin on your suicide belt, the bomb goes off, and then presumably you go to paradise. And so it's really informed by faith. Maybe it's a depraved faith, but it's still informed by faith. And so the premise of Under the Nile is that you take this washed up guy, this guy who's, again, been through the ringer. Again, there's a lot of me in this character. I would be lying if I would try to claim otherwise. But this is somebody who ended up who wanted to be a priest, but who ended up getting kicked out of the priesthood because he was seen to be psychologically unstable. And he has this breakdown, and winds up in a hospital. And when he's in the hospital, he's approached by this man, this mysterious figure, who offers to make him this deal where if he takes this certain kind of drug, which is it's still in experimental stages, but the idea behind this drug is that it will take away your fear of death. It will take away your inhibitions, and the idea is that you'd give it to soldiers and make them better soldiers, and make them fight more fiercely against these forces who were not afraid to die, these fanatics who were blowing themselves up, and had the advantage of not being afraid to die, whereas the American soldiers, even if they were brave, they wanted to escape death. They wanted to go back home and be with their families or whatever, survive their tours of duty intact. But what if you gave them something that would help them fight harder and help us win the war on terror? So the hero the anti-hero of this story, who's never named, he agrees to start taking this drug, and they watch him and keep tabs on him, and the rest of the story is just about what happens to him as he takes this whatever it is, this supposed chemical compound in its experimental phases, and the way that it changes him. But is it the drug that changes him, or is it one of those mind over matter kind of things, or placebo effect kinds of things? He thinks by the time it's over that he's figured it out, that what they've really done to him. But I wanted to leave it ambiguous. So then it goes to its conclusion, where the hero / anti-hero essentially becomes a terrorist in his own way, and that's how, it's like this reaches this satisfying kind of ending, this cathartic kind of ending for him, even though it's not what you would call a happy ending necessarily, per se. I think that this particular work, this novella, again, it's not very long. I don't write long stuff. The longest book that I've written and published is Heart Killer, and I will talk about that. I think that's next on the line. I believe that's the next one that I wrote. But everything else is either short story length or at most novella length. And I think this one is my favorite just because I think that it's a tasteful. It's more tasteful than the Columbine Pilgrim. Columbine Pilgrim really dips into some really nasty territory that I mean, I'm not saying I disapprove of it, but it's like it kind of goes there in a way that might be sensationalistic. I think this I think that I favor Under the Nihil just because it's less sensationalistic. It does more with less. It has this character. It shows him going on this journey, this psychological journey, and becoming this kind of person, and it's a disturbing story, but it doesn't rely. It's a more subtle. The things that he does are ultimately more interesting to me for being more subtle. And I have a real attachment to the character. I know I've had people read it and say, God, this guy is he's so insufferable. I hate him. This is how people who have read Under the Nihil respond to this character. And all I can say is, well, I don't hate him. I mean, I can see where he is insufferable in certain places, and he's definitely cruel, and he's definitely got moments where he's not admirable in the least, but I feel a real kinship with him, and that's just how I feel, even if everybody else who reads it just hates this guy. But I remember reading, people read Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground and just hated the narrator, couldn't stand him, and I had a very different reaction. Even though he's not admirable, I related to him, I understood him, I felt a bond and a kinship with him. So that was Under the Nile, and again, it got published by Countercurrents initially, and was eventually dropped, but then was picked up later by Terror House Press in 2020.